In this video, you're going to learn what's better, paying off your mortgage or investing. And lots of YouTubers tackle this question, from Humphrey Yang and Damien Talks Money through to Dave Ramsey. And while I love these guys, the mortgage rules in the US, the UK or Australia, well, they're different to what happens here in New Zealand. Because here in the land of the long white cloud, houses are expensive. So on one hand, a lot of us have large mortgages that we want to get rid of. But on the other hand, you also don't want to get to 60 having paid off your mortgage, but have nothing else to show for yourself. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ed, an economist and property investor here at Opes Partners. And I get why this is such a popular topic, because when it comes to money, we often get conflicting messages. We're told that the right thing to do is to get out of debt, and then we're also told that we should invest. But if I've only got an extra $100 a week, well, what should I do with it? The good news is that whether you pay off your mortgage or you invest, you're still going to get access to compounding returns, which are often referred to as the eighth wonder of the world. One of my favorite investors, Warren Buffett, actually said that his wealth has come from a combination of living in America, some lucky genes, and compound interest. But what really is compounding interest or compounding returns? Well, let's say you take $100 and you invest it in the stock market, and maybe you'll earn a 10% return that year. Well, at the end of that year, you're going to have $110. The next year, you get the same 10% return, but this time, you're not getting a return on your $100, you're getting a return on the $110 you've now got invested. So you don't just get a return on that original $100, but a return on the money you made in the first year too. Now, the real magic of compounding interest is that you start by earning a return on your money, then you earn a return on your returns, and then you make a return on the return you made off your returns. And that's why Benjamin Franklin said, money makes money, and the money that money makes more money. Now, I know that that's a bit of a tongue twister, say it fast 10 times, but here's the thing. Whether you're paying down debt or investing, in either scenario, you get access to those compounding returns. Because when you pay an extra dollar off your mortgage, you're not just reducing your debt by $1. You're also saving the interest that you would have been charged on that dollar for every remaining year of your loan. And over 20 or 30 years, that adds up big time. Your dollar essentially multiplies its impact, shaving years off your mortgage and keeping more money in your pocket. But what's better? The compounding returns that come from investing, or the compounding returns or compounding savings that come from paying off that mortgage faster? Well, there are pros and cons. The first pro of paying off your mortgage faster is that it gives you a guaranteed return. So let's say that your mortgage is fixed at a 6% interest rate and you pay an extra $100 off that mortgage. You just saved yourself $6 a year in interest. And this is a guaranteed return because you know upfront what your return is going to be because you have fixed your interest rate for perhaps a year or two. And when that interest rate changes, your return will change slightly as well. Compare that to investing in a property or the stock market. Well, if you put your $100 a week in, you don't know exactly what that $100 a week is going to turn into by the end of the year. Will the markets go up by 5%, 10%, 15% this year? Or might they even go down in value? You don't know. But when you pay it off your mortgage, you're pretty certain what that return is going to be. The other benefit is that paying off some of your mortgage might actually help you get access to a lower interest rate. So let's say you took out a big mortgage as a first home buyer. Maybe you put down a 10% deposit. Well, when you do that, you're what's called a low deposit borrower. So you're probably paying a higher interest rate because you've got a low equity margin. So here's what that means. Maybe everyone else is paying a 6% interest rate, but you're currently stuck paying a 6.75% interest rate because you bought your house with a lower deposit, so you take that higher interest rate. Well, if you take your extra money and then pay it off towards your mortgage, eventually you can start getting access to that normal interest rate, what's called the special rate. So if you are a low deposit borrower, then putting your money towards paying down that debt, it can definitely make sense. And the third big benefit is just that there's nothing quite like the peace of mind that comes from paying off your mortgage. It's the Kiwi dream, the incredible feeling of knowing that your home is truly yours. No banks, no lenders, just you and the four walls to make lots of memories in. Now, imagine waking up each morning without that kind of looming monthly mortgage payment hanging over your head. Well, that's not only going to free up your cash so you can go and invest, but it's that deep sense of security and accomplishment. You've actually tackled one of life's biggest financial hurdles, and if you've done that, that is something to be seriously proud of. But as you're deciding whether to pay off debt or invest, you've also got to weigh up some of the pros of investing too. One big benefit of investing is that you can actually get a better return. So let's say you pay a 6% interest rate on your mortgage, and remember at the moment interest rates are falling. Well, if you pay an extra $100 off your mortgage, you are saving 6% in interest, which is effectively a 6% return. Now, if you took that same $100 and invested it in a growth fund that invested in a lot of shares, over the long term, your return might be closer to 10%, which is a much better return. Now, let's put some numbers around it. Let's say you've got a $500,000 mortgage, you're paying a 6% interest rate, and you're paying off that mortgage over 30 years. Well, your minimum mortgage repayment is going to be $691 a week. Now, let's say that you can pay an extra $100 a week off that mortgage. Well, you are going to shave over 8 years off that mortgage. Instead of paying it off over 30 years, you're now going to pay it off in just under 22 years. And the really interesting thing is that if you were to just make the minimum repayments on that mortgage, in 22 years' time, you would still have a $233,000 mortgage left over, even though you'd been paying off that mortgage for 22 years. Whereas if you pay the extra $100 a week, there's no mortgage left. So paying that extra $100 a week into your mortgage, that makes you $233,000 better off. Now, let's say you took that same $100 a week and you decided to invest it. And we're going to say you're going to get a 10% return because you're investing for 22 years. That's pretty reasonable. And if you did that $100 a week for 22 years, your return would be closer to $406,000. So you're approximately $175,000 better off, or you made about 70% more money. But let's say you, instead of investing in shares, you wanted to invest in property. Now, to do that, you might need a little bit more than $100 a week. But let's say you had $250 a week in the same scenario. Is it better to pay off debt or invest? What do the returns look like? Well, let's say you had that same $500,000 mortgage, 6% interest rate, 30 years, and you decided to put $250 a week into that mortgage. Well, now you're going to be paying off that mortgage in just under 16 years. And if you just made the minimum repayments for 16 years, you would find yourself still having a $343,000 mortgage, again, even though you'd been paying off that mortgage for 16 years. So putting an extra $250 a week into the mortgage, that effectively makes you better off by $343,000. Now, let's say that instead of doing that, you think maybe I should go and buy an investment property, and I'm going to do it using the no cash needed method, which I talked about in this video, where you borrow all of the money against your own property. Well, in that case, your $250 a week might be going towards topping up that property and covering some of the mortgage repayment. So let's say that you went and bought a $600,000 investment property, and that's going up in value by 5% in a year. Well, after 16-ish years, that property could be worth $1.3 million, or just under, which means that you've made about $700K from the investment property rather than $340,000 from paying off your mortgage. So the benefit of investing is you generally can get that higher return, but it's not as certain. And if you'd like to see more of these what should I do with my money type videos, do me a quick favor and hit the like button. That's how I know if these are actually the types of videos you want to see more of. And honestly, it just really helps out the YouTube algorithm. Subscribing, that helps too. We are so close of hitting our goal of growing this channel to 20,000 subscribers. The other issue I see, particularly here in New Zealand, is that we think that if we pay off our mortgage, then we are set for life, we're financially secure. But let me ask you this, what would make you feel more secure? Having $0 in the bank, no shares, no assets, but also no mortgage, or having $100,000 worth of shares that you could sell at any time and a $100,000 mortgage. Now, in both these scenarios, your net worth is actually exactly the same, $0. But in the first scenario, you have no assets other than your family home to help you get through a tough time. In the second scenario, you've got 100K worth of liquid assets. Now, most people would say that having some assets outside my family home that I can sell if I go through some tough times, that makes me feel more secure, even if I have a small mortgage left. And the trap that a lot of Kiwis fall into is that we just want to pay off the mortgage and think, it's okay, we're going to invest later. Then we get to 65, we want to retire, we've got the mortgage-free home, but not much else to show for ourselves and not much else we can live on. And that's where you can be equity rich, but cash flow poor. And even if we think about today here in New Zealand, there are a lot of redundancies going on. And if you've just been smashing down your mortgage and you then unfortunately get made redundant, can you go and borrow more money from the bank so that you can live? Well, no, the bank's not going to let you borrow more money because you don't have any income. But if you've got money in shares or savings, maybe even in property, well, you could then sell those assets or access those savings so that you can still afford to live. So you don't just want to be thinking about building wealth in your own house. You also want to be thinking about building assets outside your family home, because then if you want access to cash, you don't have to sell the house you're living in. And I get that these pros and cons, they can really get people's emotions going. I recently had one of you guys hit me up about Mary Holmes. She's a really well-known and respected columnist for the New Zealand Herald. And the email you sent me said, bloody Mary Holmes, too far this time. Because what had happened was Mary had given some advice in her column for a couple in their 60s who were thinking about whether to sell their investment property to pay off their mortgage on their own home. And effectively they were saying, well, should we keep investing or should we sell this property and pay off our mortgage? Now, Mary had said it was probably a better idea to sell and pay off some debt. And some of you will say, well, how does that make sense when interest rates are falling and house prices are likely to rise? Well, to figure out if Mary was right or not, there are two general rules of thumb that you really need to know about when it comes to paying off debt versus investing. Generally, the closer you are to retirement or the shorter your time frame, the better it is to pay down debt. And that's because paying off debt has the certain return, whereas in the short term, investment returns are way more variable and less certain. And the second rule of thumb is that generally the higher your mortgage interest rate, the more sense it makes to pay down debt because the return from paying down that debt is pretty high. And so in this episode of the Property Academy podcast, which is my daily show, I was talking about how actually I think Mary was right in this scenario. It made more sense for this couple to pay down debt because they're in their early 60s and they want to retire soon. But if they were a couple in their 30s or 40s, the advice would be totally different and they'd probably keep investing because they've got a way longer runway. So you've always got to apply what you hear about on YouTube or in the online news. You've got to take that and apply it to your own situation.